Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. All right, we are recording. Welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I have one of my favorite people here today, Rich Litvin. Welcome, Rich.
Hey, Shayna. Man alive. I like it. I'm here.
Man alive. You are a man. You are alive. We are going to talk. Yeah, exactly. Well, right. We can talk more about aliveness, and because one of the things we said we would talk about is living an extraordinary life. Right. And what actually is an extraordinary life, and how does one, I would say, head into the realms of extraordinary? I mean, I know growing up, I've been facing this a lot lately, that growing up, there's a lot of disbelief or a lot of mistrust of joy and happiness and like goodness in a way. In my history. And so sometimes I hear the word extraordinary and I just think like, oh, that's not real. And other times I feel what it feels like to have extraordinary experiences. So I'm excited to dive into that with you. And I want to give you a quick intro before we start. So for those of you who don't know Rich, he runs a boutique leadership consultancy for high impact leaders and high net worth individuals based in Los Angeles and London. And Rich is an expert at taking high achievers to the greatest levels of success, including Olympic athletes, presidential candidates, Hollywood film directors, special force operatives, and serial entrepreneurs. And he's also the founder of 4PC, a community of the top 4% of leaders, entrepreneurs, and coaches. And his big picture, this is one of the things I love about you too, is that you have this, philanthropic aspect of you. And so his big picture is to mobilize 100 million through his connections to realize the United Nations goal of a quality education for all. And you've helped build 5 schools in Africa in the past 3 years. So Rich has written books. He has a new book coming out sometime this year, the 16th.
If I can look past my fears, yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive in. You were about to say something before we started recording, and we said, let's start the recording. Do you remember what you were going to say?
Well, I tell you what I'm present to now, actually, is that word extraordinary, because I like that word extraordinary. And I think where I went wrong in it over the years is that I've learned to hyphenate it. Extraordinary. What makes you extraordinary is when you can be more yourself than you've ever been. So
yes.
For me, I spent so much of my life trying to be something other. Because if only I could prove myself to you, if only I could be the thing that I was supposed to be, the person I'm supposed to be, then finally you'd love me, like me, appreciate me, I'd fit in.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that it doesn't work that way around. That when I can be myself, what is Brene Brown? She talks about belonging versus fitting in.
Yep.
If I come from this place of just, I belong, I don't need to prove myself. Look, I spent most of my life trying to prove myself to my dad.
Yeah. Which is very common for many men, right? I mean, I
didn't realize until I started telling this story how many men say the same thing. And for me, it was my dad, but then it was anyone I met. I was trying to prove myself to them.
Yes. And
even to this day, it plays out because it had a positive impact. This is the danger of those beliefs you took on at a young age. Yeah. They can really help you in life as well and hold you back at the very same time. So
yes.
To this day, if I have some kind of success, I give myself about 23 seconds to acknowledge myself, to appreciate what I've done. And then I'm future focused. I'm looking ahead to like what I should be doing next or what I did badly, how I could improve it. Instead of turning around to acknowledge myself for what I've achieved.
Yeah.
Which is great. I'm really driven. I'm a high performer. Like most entrepreneurs, always future focused, but I'm drained a lot of the time because I
was going to say, all right, I bet you do this with a lot of your clients, and so do I. I'm like, okay, let's actually stop, right, and give yourself more than 23 seconds. Let's try a minute, but then let's try a day or a week, or right, let's see what it's like to actually give yourself some credit, or to celebrate, or to take some time, because otherwise it does feel like a bottomless bucket, right? Where then you never get filled up and then you end up drained.
Yeah, I'm really good at helping others to do this.
Yeah.
I'm never good thing for myself. In fact, on my calendar's on the screen in front of me, this Friday, I'm going to have a bunch of massages and a facial, and because it's been booked for me by a member of my team who I took on this year.
Good.
And her job is to help me take care of myself.
Good.
And I think it was 2 years ago when I went to speak to my coach, because he said, and when I saw him, he said, "How was your vacation?" I looked at him and I said, "I haven't had a vacation." And he said, "Well, I thought you just put on 2 events back to back. And they were the biggest events you'd put on in a long time, or ever actually." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, before that, weren't you working really, really hard to make all that happen?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, and before that, I know you took about 9 months where you had to really slow down because your dad had passed away and it was a really hard time." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, that's why I thought you took a vacation."
Right. That seems to imply vacation.
But what was funny though, I said to him, "You know what? I went to a spa on Monday and I spent 5 hours there and I was so proud of myself because I'd never done that in my life. I thought this was like the ultimate in self-care, that I'd had 5 hours in a spa and I was back to work." And I realized in that moment just how I don't understand how to take care of myself. And I'm in a profession where I'm always giving to others.
Yeah.
I've got a whole business on taking care of others.
Yeah.
And of course, I just don't know how to do it for myself.
Yeah. Well, I feel moved and touched hearing that, right? That you, who I know to be a giver, I've seen you give and watched you work, and I know how much I don't know of what you do behind the scenes. But I've seen you be very, very generous. And so, both for you and for other men out there. I mean, I just had a conversation with a man yesterday who's getting divorced and, have been married for a couple decades, has a child who's in college. And it was kind of flashing back to him like, oh my God, I've been taking care of everyone else. And we were looking at this like, oh, this is an opportunity for you to start to take care of you, right? Not necessarily this way of now I have to not take care of anybody else in my life, but right, if you as a man, someone who's a provider, someone who's a generous giver, are not taking care of yourself, this is for you, Rich, and for you listening, like you're not going to make it very much longer, right?
It's true. There's a great book by Clayton Christensen called "How Will You Measure Your Life?"
Mm-hmm.
And in the back of the 3rd chapter, there's only 3 chapters or 3 sections, and the 3rd section is it's got a title like "How to Not Go to Jail." and what he says is the problem we have, and I think it's particularly as men, where we're focused on achievement, that you can see the return on investment of spending an extra hour in the office. But an extra hour spent with your wife or your kids is hard to measure. And actually, it can be incredibly draining and tiring. If I say the wrong thing to my wife, that one thing that I say means that hour is incredibly painful and uncomfortable.
Right.
That doesn't happen in business. Like I know what to do. If there's a challenge, I thrive on a challenge.
Yes.
But you go on this tiny, tiny gap each time you spend an hour away from your wife or your kids. You're on camera, so you can see me. My hands are growing apart. So over time, that tiny gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. 2 decades later, like your client found, suddenly you're estranged from your wife. Your kids don't know you, are frustrated with you. And it's because...
And your kids are grown, right? You don't get that time back. You don't get that time back with your wife or husband or whoever it may be.
And that's why we have to be really careful at measuring having a life based on what can be measured in terms of success. And particularly as men, because we measure ourselves based on external results.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve us. It can serve us. Let me put it that way. It can serve us and can feel really good. And there's a moment when we realize, oh shit, we've missed the boat.
that, right? I was just thinking that, right? When you said it can serve, it does. And then there is that moment where it's like a wake up call of, oh my God, right? That there's more to life than work.
I remember watching the TV show Rome a few years ago. I don't know if you saw that one. One of those shows, like kind of set back in historical times, but done dramatically, like Game of Thrones, but just back in Roman times. And there were one of the characters as a soldier, and he'd come back from fighting all these battles, and he came to spend time with his wife. And within a day of being back with his wife, she was nagging him because he hadn't gone to get the bread from the shop or something like that. Hadn't cleaned the house, and he went back to war. He left the next day, went back to war. It was easier to go and fight battles than to do what it took to be in relationship. And I love that they captured that in this show, because it speaks to how hard it can be for us as men to be fathers, to be husbands or boyfriends or partners. And it can be so much easier to be at work. It's the joke I had from the moment that my boys are born with any father I would meet is that it would be easier to be back in the office at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and less tiring to be at work.
Yeah. I feel that sometimes, like my son goes to school and I'm like, oh,
yeah,
it's like almost like a vacation. Oh, I have to work today, but it still feels a little like a vacation some days because, right, it can be so intense. So, I mean, I'm curious for you personally, right? Like, how do you navigate this kind of tightrope or this thin line in a way, right? To have a great impact on the world and to take care of yourself. Because I believe that having an extraordinary life, right, is not just about the giving and the generosity and the philanthropic work you do. That's a huge part of it. But then the other part has to be, you actually receiving, you having meaningful experiences, whatever they may be for you.
So there's a good distinction in what you said. You mentioned receiving, and that was thrown in. That's the one that's hardest for me.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to receive. As you begin to pose that question, I was about to answer it, from the place of where do I make time to be with my wife and my boys? Mm-hmm. But the receiving piece is actually the hardest for me. It's really hard for me to receive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I get curious personally, right? Like, oh, well, what makes it hard? Because I imagine that many, many other men out there are thinking a very similar thing. Like, oh God, how can I receive?
Well, what came up when you said that is, when I was a kid, I had a mum who was very overprotective. Mm-hmm. So anytime a woman tries to take care of me in particular, I get so triggered. I just don't want, no, I've got this.
It's like hands off, back up.
Hands off, I've got this. Mm-hmm. Or let me take care of you. Mm-hmm. But a woman in particular tries to take care of me. It's hard on my system. It's actually really hard for me to receive.
Yeah. Is it kind of paradoxical too? Like, is there some part of you that does want it, or is it all of you that's just like, no?
Interesting. I don't know. Is there even a part of me that wants it? I mean, sometimes I can be completely drained at times by what I'm up to. I'd say every 2 or 3 years, I hit a point where I'm just wiped. Mm-hmm. And I have to kind of retreat and take care of myself again, get ready to come back out in the world. Yeah. But that's the MO I have right now. As I'm talking to you, I'm realizing, I wonder if there's a way to preempt that, to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
One of the ways I've become good at receiving is by creating an extraordinary team. Mm-hmm. I've got an amazing team around me. I have. I took on a member of my team a year ago, and I said, your specific role is to help me to do the things that I'm afraid to do or I'm struggling to do. So she said, well, what are you afraid to do? And I said, well, I've always wanted to do boxing. Like I used to do martial arts. Maybe I'll get back into martial arts, but I've always wanted to learn how to box, but I've been afraid of it.
Yeah.
Got a text from her the next day saying, tomorrow morning you're booked in for a boxing class.
Yeah.
I've been doing boxing for a year.
Yeah.
So I've created an amazing team who help me do the things that I can't do.
I love that. And I love for men listening, right? If you don't have a team for this, you can have a friend do this. But I just had this mischievous idea. I was like, can you send me her email so I can actually have her start telling you have to receive certain things?
Nice.
Because maybe there's some fear of receiving there.
Oh yeah, I've got no doubt. I mean, you could probably coach me around this. I've got no doubt. I mean, like I say, I can trace it back. I know where it comes from.
Yeah.
So I've got no doubt there's a fear in there.
Yeah.
But this is why I have my own coach. I just did a review last year and realized I worked with 11 different coaches last year.
Wow. You were coached by 11 different people?
I had 11 different people coach me, from coaches around my business to coaches, my boxing coach to, I had a lot of different people I worked with. I got to walk my talk. If I'm in a business of working with people and supporting them, I got to be able to, for myself.
Which is powerful. I think that's so powerful to be an example of, you're a man who's running a, 7-figure, 6-figure set, like very, business. How many people are on your team now at this point? 9 people. Right. And that you are getting coached, right? This is not about, for any man, it's not about getting to a point where you would be the one who knows it all. And, that would prove that you've got it all together and that you are as good as your dad or whoever wanted you to be, right? You get to, and there's a humility and also a willingness to keep growing, by putting yourself in the hands of others or admitting like, oh, others know things that I don't know.
I see there's an irony in there too. I've been driven for a long time, most of my life, since childhood. Be the best you can be has been a phrase that's driven me a long time. And so it's why I had 2 different business coaches last year. I had someone who coached me around being on media. I'm working with an ex-Navy SEAL who's working with me doing lots of body-based work. I've got a boxing teacher, all sorts of people who are working with me right now. And at the same time, so that there's a place where that's admirable, and there's a place where too it comes from that deep insecurity of mine. Like when will I finally be enough? How can I prove myself to you? That was an interesting year last year with a lot of different people. I was doing a lot of different things. There are other years I don't have that many coaches, but I'm always getting support. I'm always learning. One of the private groups I run, I posted recently, someone asked about podcasts, and I listed a dozen different podcasts I listen to. He said, where do you get the time? And I said, that one's not, I can't answer that question. Where do you get the time? How could I not have the time? I'm constantly listening, reading, learning.
They are top priorities.
They're not even a priority. I couldn't not be doing them. They're like oxygen for me. I have to. It's just, I'm always reading. I'm always learning. I couldn't not be. We worked with a branding consultant last year, and she came up with this phrase. I forget the exact phrase, learning leaders or something. The kind of leaders I love to work with. And they're leaders who love to learn. And that moment she said it was a deep hit for me, because I realized, I don't work with any leader. It's particularly leaders who love to learn. Yeah. Because me too.
Yeah. Well, and that speaks to something, I think, which is that you have a clarity about who you enjoy working with, right? Who inspires you, and you're creating your life around that, right? If we're talking about an extraordinary life, it's not you working with anyone who will come to you. It's you actually really getting clear and choosing, oh, these are the people who inspire me. These are the people who add something to my life as I'm giving to them.
Yeah, look, I run my life based on a bunch of rules of thumb, heuristics. And one of them is hell yes or hell no. So if it's not a hell yes, it has to be a hell no. I want to surround myself with people who energize me. One of the first things I do when I work with a new client is have them draw a line down the center of a piece of paper. And on the left-hand side, they make a list of all the people, places, things, and habits that energize them. And on the right-hand side, same thing, but the things that drain them of energy. And then all we do is one at a time, take off the list, remove or shift or change the things that drain them of energy. And what's funny is that those list of goals that they have that looked impossible suddenly start occurring simply because they have more energy.
Yes. I love that. And I've been thinking recently about, try and find words for this. Sometimes I have a very kinesthetic experience of like, I see something or I feel something and I have to find the words for it. I've been having this experience of energy recently this year of like, oh, I know that something is working for my life or something's leading me to good, just based on this feeling of like peaceful uplifting, or, you were talking about in the beginning, I think before we started recording, that you've been going through change and that it can feel scary, or that it's felt scary. And yet it's also really exciting. But there's something, both of those, I feel like there's an energy up, right? Whether it's that kind of fearful excitement energy or a kind of uplifting, joyful energy, it's very different than something's feeling heavy or bogged down, And so I've been using that actually as a guidepost or a direction this year. And so, yeah, I'm curious more about that for you too, or the fear that has come with some of the change that you're going through.
Well, it's another one of the heuristics I have, another one of the rules of thumb I have for my life is that I call it my compass. My compass is when there's some fear on this side and some excitement on that side, that fine line down the middle between fear and excitement is the direction I have to head. Too much fear and I can't move, too much excitement and I'm not grounded. But that path, that fine line down the center between fear and excitement, that's always the direction I have to head in. I get bored otherwise. I could have made, the book I wrote for coaches called The Prosperous Coach, so sold 40,000 copies. Could have made millions by taking one event and running it again and again every single year.
Right, without changing the content.
It would have bored the shit out of me. I've never done the same event twice. That's just been my commitment. So I always look for something different. A few years ago, I was wondering, what do I do next? And I could have made a lot of money teaching people how to coach because lots of people coming into that coaching industry, there's a huge market there, and it would have bored the crap out of me and everyone was doing it.
Yeah.
So what could I do that's different? Well, I'm tired of walking into rooms where people are struggling or complaining. And what if I created a room full of people who inspired me? So I created that, turned it into a business model. I run a program called 4PC for some of the top leaders and coaches out there.
Yeah.
I love that. I have the phrase I use, if you're the most interesting person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
So I do two things. One, I build a business around how do I bring the most interesting people into my world? And two, I spend time in mastermind groups and in communities where I'm one of the least interesting people there. I'm surrounded by people who fascinate me.
Which I can feel as you say that, my stomach starts to get, a little bit knotted. And I just think about how courageous and how brave it is to put yourself in those situations, right? It can seem like, oh, it's a good idea for me to be the one in the room who knows things and who's going to lead people. And yet, right, for you, what you found, and I found this too, it gets boring, or it gets like the same old thing. It's not challenging us to grow and to learn.
Yeah.
One of the things I also love is that, through being in the world of business and coaches, one of the things that I've heard a lot is take a program, make it work, sell it, make it so that lots of people are running through it, and keep going with it for years and years and years until you have a calling, until they are asking for the next thing. And I love that you have also proven, right? You get to do it your way. You haven't done the same workshop, you just said, ever, right? And yet you're running a very successful business. So you did it your way, you made it your own, and it's working.
There's another rule of thumb I run my life and my business by, which is, there's a quote by Earl Nightingale who said, if you want to be successful, watch what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. The majority is almost always wrong.
Interesting.
Now, it's not that he's true in every instance.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the fact that that's a fun way to live life and run a business.
Yeah.
In December, we're selling tickets for an event we're running in April. And in December, I said to my team, why don't we do a webinar? We never do something different. You can tell I like doing things differently.
Yeah.
My team got a bit worried, but we don't normally do this. How are we going to make it happen at short notice? It's the problem we have. The visionary runs the business. The team get freaked out because you're the person with the ideas. And
they're the ones who are a little more stable and oriented towards.
Exactly. And we did it at 2 weeks' notice. And I started reading up online about how to run a webinar. And there were all these systems for how to run a webinar. And I'd read about 10 different articles. And I thought, are you okay with bad language?
Yeah, I was going to say, fuck it.
Fuck it. This is not me. What I'm really good at is coaching.
Yeah.
And I got on this webinar and I coached 3 people for an hour. And at some point for 5 minutes in the middle, I said, let me tell you about the event that's coming up. And I went back to coaching them.
Great.
And we sold, I forget how many tickets we sold. We made $50,000 on one webinar.
Wow.
That doesn't happen, I'm told. That doesn't happen in the world of webinars.
Right.
Well, because we weren't trying to run a webinar. We were trying to serve people. I want, like, how can I coach you guys, give you as much value as possible, and everyone who's listening, serve them powerfully. So I built my business on this idea of doing things differently.
And serve people powerfully. I love that, because I have another friend who also, his thing has been about creating really powerful experiences for other people. And he's one of the people I see who's surrounded by the most interesting experiences and interesting people. And right, I see that in both of you, that you're creating, you're generously looking at, what would serve people? What would light these people up? What would be extraordinary for them? And then that becomes a part of your life. You get to have these extraordinary experiences.
Yeah, totally. My most fun experience last year, we had this, so my business plan for 12 years has been one line. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I'm not one of these people who were born to be an entrepreneur. I was a high school teacher for 12 years, 15 years. I can't remember how so long. I think it was 2005. Almost 15 years, yeah. And lost my job and began this world of coaching. And I didn't know you have a business plan. So for 12 years, I run my business with this one line: meet fun and interesting people. That's been my business plan for 12 years. And last year I was doing some reflection, and I was thinking, well, if that's my business plan, why don't I make that even more of a focus this year? What if I could actively create those fun, interesting people? And I had this idea. The working title was Interesting People Dinners. And it never got past the working title. What? Interesting People Dinners.
Dinners. Uh-huh.
Never got past the working title. What we said is, let's get together 8 people. Anything more than 8 at a dinner party, you break into separate conversations. You want small enough, one conversation.
Yep.
8 people, has to be a round table, should be somewhere interesting. So we tend to go to the Getty Museum here in LA that has a round table in a restaurant that's only open on the weekends at the museum. And we just get a group of fascinating, interesting people together. We've had the state controller of California, who runs the 6th biggest economy on the planet.
Wow. We've
had rabbis, magicians. We've had Leonardo DiCaprio's acting teacher. We've had the most fascinating groups of people. And the entrance requirement, when you walk in the door, I say that you're not allowed to tell anybody who you are or what you do.
Uh-huh.
It's okay. But normal dinner party is like, let me tell you who I am.
Right.
You're not allowed to do that. And then I say to them, I'm going to start the evening, always do some chatting and conversation, but I'm going to start the evening off by sowing the seeds with a question or two. And my invitation is to answer it as vulnerably and honestly as you dare. Because if you do, you're going to have a chance to go deeper than you normally do. This isn't a normal dinner party.
Yeah.
And I've been surprised every time people have gone really deep. We've had such close connection. After the first one, everyone said, I want to come to the next one. And I suddenly realized, oh, well then how are we going to roll if the same people come every time?
Groups of interesting people if everyone's coming back.
So I said, okay, well, what we're going to do is once a year, we're going to have a party. And everyone who's come to the Interesting People dinners will be invited to that party. And the entrance requirement is that you have to bring along the most interesting person you know. That's a way to build up a community of interesting people.
Well, and that's
I was very clear. Here's the last piece. I was very clear. I was not doing this. I'm not targeting people who could be potential clients or business partners. These are just who are the most interesting people I can connect with and invite. And I've been stunned how many people, everyone we've invited has just said, yeah, I'd love to come.
That's so great. The thing that I was seeing also as you were talking is that it's very generative, right? Like there are a lot of people who I've seen who get to a place in their life where they're feeling bored or they're feeling dissatisfied, and yet they're not actively creating, right? To me, you did the work of looking at what would be fun for me, and then how am I actually going to make it happen, right? And it doesn't sound like it's that challenging to make that happen. You find a place at the round table, you invite some people, and extraordinary things come of it.
Yeah, you can start in your own house, and you can invite a bunch of people who you find interesting, and then you just ask them, who's the most interesting person you know?
Yeah.
And I invite them to the next one. The ball will roll really fast.
Yeah. And you also set the stage, right? Not only with your questions, but by letting people know, here's how I want you to play, or here's how I want you to participate. bring your vulnerability and your authenticity, and that actually creates that bond. But also, you said you found everybody's been willing.
Yeah, that surprised me. It's been because a lot of these are not people immersed in the world that I'm in, of coaching, of being willing to take those risks of being vulnerable, and they've all been willing to dive in straight away.
Yeah, which I think that speaks to me to how much people I've seen out there, no matter what, kind of group they're in, are often longing for people going deep and being real and not being so isolated. And it can seem like, well, nobody's doing it, but until we actually bring it and see if someone will meet us back, we really have no idea whether someone, is going to go there with us.
Yeah, we are craving this. Right now, my wife, Monique, is creating a one-woman show. And it's based on her experience growing up mixed race here in America, here in LA. Her dad is African-American. He grew up in North Carolina. He grew up during segregation.
Wow.
He traces his family back through generations, through the times of slavery. They literally have the records of slavery for his family. Monique's mum is Irish American, trace her family back to Ireland. They're white. They grew up in upstate New York, and the boys in the family, Monique's uncles, are all strapping lads with red hair, white freckled faces. And this is a young girl who grew up with this mixed family in the 70s and 80s. And what comes behind that show, the way I see the power of her show is that what it actually shows people is that the differences that we think separate us are actually what make us closer together than we realize.
Yeah.
At a time, in this moment in time in America, where we talk about differences and how we're so divided, actually those very differences draw us closer if we're willing to be in conversation.
Exactly. If we're willing to be in conversation, if we're willing to get close enough in that we can actually hear from that other person and see, oh, this is what makes you you, or this is how we're actually not as different as we seem on the surface.
And if you're willing to create a conversation that starts from a place of being vulnerable, that's when people realize, oh, we're more similar than we realize.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I actually really appreciate about you too is that you're not afraid of silence. And, in this moment where there was a pause, I was just like, I wonder where we're going to go now. And we have a little bit of time left. So I'm wondering actually what feels most inspiring to you? What do you want men to know? It might be about creating an extraordinary life, and it might just be something else that suddenly inspires you.
Mm-hmm. Nice question. Yeah, I'm not afraid of silence. Silence is actually one of the most powerful coaching tools there is. And it's very hard for people to be silent that long, to be present with somebody, to see what arises. So I've been reflecting on this. I'm writing my next book right now. The working title is The Price of Leadership. This isn't a book about how to become a leader. This is a book about the price you pay. This is a book about
as a leader, when you are a leader.
When you play at that level, there's a price you pay. There's a cost you have to pay to play at that level. I met a guy recently who'd sold his business for 8 figures, and he said, I was about to start my next business when I realized I only started the first one to be happy. I'm still not happy. So I think there's some uncomfortable truths about leadership that we don't focus on. If you don't pay attention, you'll be on your deathbed regretting the impact you didn't make.
Yeah.
And I lost a really friend this year, James Butler, who I think you know.
Yeah.
James was 28 years old, died of a brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
This is a man who served in Afghanistan, who was an ex-Navy bomb disposal expert, and just out of nowhere.
He was so inspiring. And then one day, just gone.
He was literally on holiday with his fiance planning their wedding. And so we don't know, like there are only 2 certainties in life. It's not death and taxes. It's A, that we're going to die, and B, we don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so how can you focus your life on the difference you want to make? And there isn't time to wait. People talk about doing it when I retire, then finally I'll be a philanthropist, or I'll do this, or I'll do charitable work. No, if you don't have a track record of doing that stuff, it's not going to happen the day you retire.
Right. So a lot of men don't make it to retirement because they're working so hard and so, not taking care of themselves. And yeah.
And look, I work with a lot of really high performers, people who've achieved a lot in life, done all sorts of really fascinating things. And the way I work with them is I get really present with them, and I ask them questions. And here's the thing with really high performers: when you're elite at what you do, when you're the top of your field, if you were asking the right questions, you'd have the right answers. So the premise I come from is you're not asking the right questions. And the job of a really great coach isn't to answer the questions their clients come with. It's to help them live into better questions.
Yeah.
That's what's fun for me, helping people shift people's world. One question can have a massive impact on people.
Massive impact. Yeah. Yeah. I love a bunch of the things you just said. I mean, one, the not waiting, right? I've been really thinking recently about, I've been shifting my work to work with men around love, leadership, and legacy. And that legacy piece of creating a meaningful life now and not getting to your deathbed, and looking back with regret. And that we don't know. I mean, I think, you and I are getting older. We've known each other for a long time, and we were kind of babies in a way when we first met. And now we're starting to be in the second half of our lives. And I'm really starting to see, oh, wow. I know people who have cancer. I know people who have died, like you said, suddenly this year. I know people who committed suicide. I mean, it's just, we just don't know what's going to happen. And it's not that then we have to be reckless, but how can we actually create these meaningful experiences now?
I was listening to Dan Sullivan the other day. He trains entrepreneurs for 25 years. He said, I don't like this word legacy. Everyone talks about legacy. He said, I don't want to leave a legacy. I want to die and really piss people off. And I was working on 10 different projects, and now how are they going to get these projects to continue now that I'm gone? And I thought it was a great catch, because legacy is a present moment activity.
It is.
It sounds like it's future based. What's the legacy I'm going to leave?
Right.
So, no, it's this
actually
moment.
Now.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And the question piece too, right? A lot of men in particular who I work with think, there's something about having the right answers. Then I prove I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. I'm, leaderly enough. Right. And what I've often seen you do really, really well is ask those questions as the leader, right? Put it back on the people who you're leading or guiding or empowering, instead of you just handing over this answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you what I believe too. What I believe is that your fears are a clue to what you really, really want. And so one of the things that's interesting for me is to look at, what am I afraid of? I have something I call a what scares me list. I make a list of all the things that scare me.
I love that. That's great.
And then my job is to have a look at, like, what's underneath that? What do I want that's underneath that fear?
So you don't just necessarily push toward that thing. You actually look at what the fear is. Yeah,
both. It will depend, but creating a what scares me list is a very powerful way to start to look at what you really, really want in life. People don't start from that place. They go to what they think they want, to what they should want, to what their mum and dad said they ought to want.
Right.
I was at 16 years old. I wanted to be a doctor. And in the end, I didn't get the grades that were high enough. I didn't want to retake exams, and I went on a slightly different path. My degree's in behavioral physiology, and I headed off a different direction. But I was chatting to my dad a few years ago about this fact that I always wanted to be a doctor. It was just in me. I'd always had that desire. And he said, and I said, I remember I got a doctor's kit when I was a kid, and I think that's where it started. And he said, oh yeah, your mum bought you that doctor's kit because she wanted you to be a doctor. It's like, oh my God, we had no idea of the impact of what our parents' desires are for us and how they're playing out into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this and being here and living a life that I think is a really powerful example for people who, who want to be doing good in the world and also want to be having meaningful experiences and having fun and joy and intimacy and all of that. So thank you for being an awesome example.
Thank you. We put together the book I'm writing, whilst it's in draft form, I put together an initial version of it that I called The Success Paradox.
Great.
About how every lessons you've had in life can actually be holding you back from what's really possible. We put a page together for your audience.
Thank you.
If they go to richlitvin.com/manalive, they can download that.
richlitvin.com/manalive. Awesome. I highly, highly recommend going and getting it. You said it's The Success Paradox?
That was the title of the book earlier last year. The title might change. The premise in the first part of the book that you'll see, it's a draft of where we're going, but it gives you a sense of some of the ideas that I'm really taking time to
right. Like as you were saying, you've been driven in a way to success by trying to prove to your dad that you're good enough. And yet then when you get to a certain level of success, you realize, oh, this is actually holding me back.
Not only that, it's not what I wanted. I mean, we have a president right now who's a perfect example of you can never have enough of what you don't really need.
Yeah.
And we don't often catch that. Yeah. It's easier to see in others than it is in ourselves. Let me put it that way.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Shana.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.